What's good, NIO family? It's Rey-Jay back with another video. And this one will break down what's going on with NIO stock and what you should be watching for going forward. I'm also going to talk about Tesla stock and what you should be watching for, and also SPY and the QQQ, breaking down the technicals and what the news is saying about the markets. Now, all of this may affect NIO as we're going to see a very big move depending on what data drops for tomorrow. Before I break anything down about all this information, let me just mention a couple of things. Firstly, I am not a financial planner, so take none of this as financial advice. And also, if you guys can, please smash the like button if you want to see more videos like this. It not only benefits me, it benefits the entire NIO community as a whole. And finally, don't forget about the Webull link. The offer ends very soon. If you deposit any amount of money, you are guaranteed up to 12 free stocks. Anyways, now let's talk about NIO, what's going on with the share price. NIO is down 6.46% for the day. Overall, NIO didn't really do anything that caused this to happen. This has more to do with the external factors involving the trade wars between China and the USA. You can see right over here, there's been like some talk about this and more restrictions that were made on critical chip metals, which were imposed by Chinese officials. And for this going forward, we have Janet Yellen actually in China. She had been speaking about some important things and making more regulatory changes. So we're just going to be watching to see what happens with this moving forward. For now, there are still some tensions, so it's just worth noting. But when it comes to the overall market, why did NIO actually sell off in the morning like this? It wasn't just because of NIO, it's also because of the whole market. I mean, if you look at SPY, look at the QQQ, these things were selling off as well. Very early in the morning, SPY sold off quite a bit. And all of these stocks ended up selling off together for the very beginning. It's just that NIO didn't recover with the market the way it did. The reason why the market sold off, and this did contribute to NIO, is because this news came out. Basically, the private sector companies added 497,000 jobs in June, according to the reports. That's more than double the expectations. Why is this so important? This is because the Fed was telling us that if the economy is too hot, they're going to have to be more hawkish. And so far, the data is suggesting that we're seeing a lot of jobs being added. And now this is going to actually relate to tomorrow because 1 hour before the market opens, we have more jobs numbers coming out. We have the unemployment rate coming out. That's going to be very important. And then we have non-farm payrolls and the labor force participation rate. All of this important data is going to dictate how the market ends up moving for tomorrow. We want a high unemployment rate or something very close to expectations. If it's too low, the market's not going to like it. The market's going to likely end up getting a rug pull if we get a very low unemployment rate. So we want this to be at 3.7% or higher. Unfortunately, I know it, like I don't really want to say this in a way where I sound like a jerk or someone that's sadistic or anything like that, to look down at any everyday people. I want the best for as many people as possible. I want people to not suffer. I don't want anyone to suffer in essence. But the reason why I'm saying this is because we have to look at this in the view of the market. The market wants unemployment to go up because we need some short-term pain so that the long term is going to be brighter. Because if we don't get pain in aggregates demand in the job sectors, there's a risk of inflation coming back up, and that's going to be even more impactful, even more painful for the economy moving forward. And you could already see the effects of it just looking at the last year. It's very painful for everyday people and their spending powers, and it really hurts children and millions of people as well. So that's kind of like the trade-off. Some pain in the unemployment sector temporarily, so that for the longer term we eventually get lower inflation rates, and eventually we help the Fed meet their target of 2%. All right, so I hope that's clear. I'm not wishing anything horrible for anyone. I'm simply stating that unemployment, once again, has these targets. And anyways, going back to NIO, things are looking pretty decent for NIO from a technical standpoint. NIO has integrated the 150 kilowatt hour batteries that just came out. And this is going to allow their cars to have longer ranges, especially for the ES6, which he mentioned. I don't know if this is verified yet, but he mentioned that the new battery would manage a range for 930 kilometers. This is according to the Chinese standards. And this is very close to their 1,000 kilometers range for the ET7. Very, very interesting stuff. If they actually meet these numbers, that would be very awesome. That's well over like 570 miles, I believe, or something like that, that they could go on a single charge before they have to replace the battery or just like straight up charge it again. That is some awesome stuff. I'm very impressed with the company for that. There's also this news as NIO is getting an increased price price ratio because the company is continuing to outperform the markets. And there was some news that's from Morgan Stanley. They're saying that NIO is once again going to outperform the market. They reiterated that. And finally, looking at the data, NIO tends to be green about 53% of the time on Friday, so the odds do favor NIO trying to rebound a bit. And finally, looking at the short interest, we did see a slight increase at about 12.9 1.95 million of these NIO shares being shorted. It's not extremely high, but compared to these other levels, it is a slight increase compared to like most of these levels back here. There was an increase in NIO shares shorted. Just as a reminder for earnings, we have Levi's reporting earnings very soon. That's the only one for the week. Just wanted to note that. Finally, for NIO, we got 52 million in volume, still pretty decent, not really that bad. So we're not selling off on high selling pressure. Overall, still stagnant, it's trying to hold up quite nicely. Now, looking at some more data, we can see that it was reported on NIO's Twitter page that in February 2019, NIO Life worked with the Central St. Martin's, a top-tier global design academy, to identify the most potential young designers and build blue sky thinking, the global designer community, basically. So this news just came out. This is some interesting stuff. And overall, I still have very optimistic levels of hope for NIO. But now let's talk about the charts very briefly. What's going on in the market? What's going on with NIO? So just to note, when you look at NIO, this thing so far, it did drop quite a bit, hitting support at 9.5. If that fails, NIO does have potential to come all the way down to about 9.2. This entire zone is going to be the next support zone to really watch out for. And there's a chance that NIO could be going for this gap down here on like the 9.4s. There could be a little bit more downside coming based off this trend. But this is going to be heavily dictated by the data that comes out tomorrow at 8:30 a.m. If unemployment is very high, right, we could see the market bounce and NIO could bounce and try to make its way right back up. There's technically a bullish divergence that is developing, but there's no guarantee it's ready to bounce just yet. Now, you could argue that we have these like imbalances here. We could see NIO come back to $10 very soon. That's also a possibility. But before that happens, we need to see NIO get above 9.68. And after that, we have to see it get above this like resistance right here at 9.86. If it breaks above these resistances, we could see NIO make its way up to about $10. But for now, just watch it very carefully and see what it does. I think it's either going to drop a little bit more to about 9.4 and then try to bounce, or it tries to bounce like immediately from these levels. It's got to be one of those two. I'm going to be looking for a bounce on it as it is quite oversold. Either it drops a little more and tries to bounce, or it bounces from here. I say this based off the fact that, first off, it dropped pretty hard. We have a bullish divergence, and the news has been quite positive for it. But it's also going to depend heavily on the data, so I'm not as certain. I'm just leaning more in that direction based off the current trend and based off what I'm seeing here. So there's a chance the market could even try to bounce collectively depending on the unemployment numbers. But just to be safe, we're going to be watching the data. For SPY to turn bullish, we need to see this thing break above 440. Then above that comes 442, and then it could start flying to fill this gap closer to 444. That would be the more bullish case if we do get some decent unemployment numbers. If the opposite happens, if the numbers are not good and the market starts tanking more, you're going to be watching this 438, 437, 436 zone as support, all of those different areas. And we have 435.76 next as the major support zone. So watch that as well. But for now, the market is once again trying to hold up. So we're going to be watching this very carefully and see how we respond to these different levels. If we break resistance, make sure you watch every single one of these EMAs and see what happens with all the data. My best prediction would be the market cools off a little bit. Then when the data comes out, the market starts pushing. We try to see SPY get back to fill this gap. I would hope for that, but just to be safe, we'll see what happens with the data tomorrow. For confirmation, we need to hold above 440. If that's the case, there's going to be a chance it's going to try to test 442 to 444, which is where we have this unfilled gap. I'm leaning more in that direction, but once again, we need confirmation first. So wait for that, and we will see what happens with the data dropping. For Tesla, if you're bullish, we need to see it hold above 278. If it breaks that, watch 280. Get above 280, this thing's going to likely try to fill this gap at 283. We have this unfilled gap up here, which could take it to much higher levels. If it breaks down, you're going to be watching 275 as support. If that fails us, watch 272.88. If that support fails us, it's going to come all the way down to where 269 is, which is very close to where we have our 200 EMA. If that fails us, it's going to fill the gap and come all the way down to the low 260s. But for now, I'd rather watch this very carefully. Okay, I'd watch this very carefully and just see how this goes. We have to watch for confirmation first. If the numbers are decent tomorrow, we could see Tesla rebound, but we have to wait for confirmation just to be safe. Last but not least, for the triple Q, if you're bullish, you want to see this thing break above 368. Break that, then we're going to be watching 370. If it breaks that, we have this unfilled gap all the way up there. If it fails to do so, you're going to be watching 366 as support. If that fails, watch 364. If that fails, just 363, then 360 after that. In my opinion, the triple Q, from a technical standpoint, is looking like it wants to bounce and try to push up to 368, eventually break above that. But there's no confirmation of it doing that. We don't really see that happening because we have to be patient and we simultaneously have to wait for the data first. So we'll wait and see what happens tomorrow morning with all the data dropping. Make sure you're ready for both the bull and bear cases. I'm leaning more in the direction that the market's going to try to bounce, but just to be safe, wait for confirmation. For confirmation of a bounce on NIO, we want to see this thing get above the 9.7 or so, and then it has potential to make its way up to 9.86, then potentially $10 afterwards. But first, we have to wait and see what happens. Be very patient, and I'll see you guys very soon. All right, so thank you for listening. Have an absolutely spectacular rest of the day. NIO to the moon as the long term is still incredibly bright, and peace out.